In other words, if it were ever to be possible to eliminate affliction from our earthly existence by means of some drug or other medical mumbo-jumbo, the result would not be to make life delectable, but to make it too banal or trivial to be endurable. This, of course, is what the cross of Christ signifies, and it is the cross more than anything else that has called me inexorably to Christ. The pearl of greatest price is the glory of Christ. Thus, Paul stresses that in our sufferings, the glory of Christ's all-sufficient grace is magnified. So, suffering clearly is designed by God not only as a way to wean Christians off of self and onto grace, but also as a way to spotlight that grace and make it shine. That is precisely what faith does. It magnifies Christ's future grace. The deep things of life in God are discovered in suffering. Christ has prepared a love offering for the world by suffering and dying for sinners. It is full and lacking in nothing, except one thing, a personal presentation by Christ himself to the nations of the world. God's answer to this lack is to call the people of Christ, people like Paul, to make a personal presentation of the afflictions of Christ to the world. In doing this, we fill up what is lacking in Christ's afflictions. We finish what they were designed for, namely a personal presentation to the people who do not know about their infinite worth. Our calling is to make the afflictions of Christ real for people by the afflictions we experience in bringing them the message of salvation. Since Christ is no longer on the earth, he wants his body, the church, to reveal his suffering in its suffering. Since we are his body, our sufferings are his sufferings. Therefore, our sufferings testify to the kind of love Christ has for the world. Suffering and martyrdom have to be seen as part of God's plan. They are his instruments by which he achieves his purposes in history and by which he will accomplish his final purpose with man. Christ's suffering is for propitiation. Our suffering is for propagation. Every kind of suffering can become a ministry for other people's salvation. Our sufferings make Christ's sufferings known so that people can see the kind of love Christ offers. The entire New Testament treats suffering in a Christian hedonist context. The Christ-exalting miracle is not just the suffering, but the joy in the suffering. One way of rejoicing in suffering comes from fixing our minds firmly on the greatness of the reward that will come to us in the resurrection. The effect of this kind of focus is to make our present pain seem small in comparison to what is coming. Another way of rejoicing in suffering is kindled by the truth that our joy itself is a proven pathway to glory. It comes from realizing that through our suffering, others are seeing the worth of Christ and standing firm because of our faith in the fire. The glory of Christ is our great gain. For this we will suffer the loss of anything and everything. And everyone who sees in our suffering the superior worth of Christ and believes is another image and evidence of the great worth, and therefore another reason to rejoice. In the pursuit of joy through suffering, we magnify the all-satisfying worth of the source of our joy. God himself shines as the brightness at the end of our tunnel of pain. If we do not communicate that he is the goal and the ground of our joy in suffering, then the very meaning of our suffering will be lost. The meaning is this: God is gain. God is more glorified in us when we are most satisfied in him.